Can you eat another one while it's going on and film it?
But I fully plan on having all of these finished by the end of the show.
Every time he tries to get a donut, I'm going to make out I'm about to talk to him.
A few moments later.
Jamie, I got you. You're going to have to hold that donut as well while you're doing it. You've been writing some stuff. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. I'm back, although my voice doesn't seem to be, so you're going to have to bear with me there. I'm me being Scott Pacino, and of course we have Jamie Davis, and we have Ian from Light Reading. I don't know why you didn't get a surname. I sort of forgot your surname. I always want to say Ian Anderson. For some reason I think of Jethro Tull when I look at you. Anyway. Just a reminder that if you're listening to this on SoundCloud, you can also watch it on the site or on YouTube. And if you're watching it, you can also listen to it on SoundCloud or iTunes. So this week is the week that the CES and Consumer Electronics show in Las Vegas, where it was apparently raining all week, which made me laugh, ended. So we're going to start off by talking about that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about social media censorship and some of the interesting stuff that's going on there. We've got Jamie's had a bee in his bonnet about the UK government's sort of supposed role in our neck of the woods this week. So you've got some ranting to do on that, haven't you? And Ian's done a bit of ranting this week about, believe it or not, 5G. It does crop up every now and then, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's what we'll finish off on. So I'll start off with the CES stuff, although certainly for Telecoms.com, Jamie's been doing much of the reporting. But it's the first big trade show of the year. It's not just a telecoms one, as the name implies. It's consumer electronics in general. But as we can't help but notice, consumer electronics has come to increasingly to mean mobile over the years. Other sort of big topics that tend to come up there are more living room consumer electronics. Like it used to be all about TVs, like HD and 4K and all that sort of thing. But increasingly, I think Jamie, and I will stop my monologue in a second, hand it over to you. I'm going to wait till you stuck a donut in your mouth and then then pass the ball to you. The living room now is more about these smart speakers, isn't it, Jamie? These like Google and Amazon are especially strong on these smart speakers that are internet enabled, that sort of run your life and all that sort of thing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the sort of latest on that?
Yeah, I mean, it was. This is where Google went really big.
Right.
They're not shy most of the time when it comes to advertising and saying how great they are, but yeah, this show apparently, I wasn't out there, so I got to go on hearsay. But Google was plastered everywhere in terms of advertising. The only company that managed to beat it apparently was Huawei. Okay. With the Mate 10, which didn't really work out very well for them.
We'll come to that.
But yeah, all you're seeing now is Amazon and Google flying ahead and trying to control the living room.
Yeah.
And there are some sort of pretend players who think they're in this league, like Bixby from Samsung or Siri from Apple, and they like to think that they're any good, but realistically they're so far behind.
Especially in terms of the hardware. So, there's obviously this Cortana at Microsoft as well. There's at least 5 and probably more sort of voice platforms.
So Cortana I'm all right with.
Yeah.
Because it's more sort of workflow. So
right.
You look at, like, Cortana is designed for primarily Microsoft Office. So you're gonna use it more in your day-to-day work life,
okay.
And therefore it can operate alongside Alexa and Google.
So they're not being very focused on the living room with that then?
No. Cortana's Microsoft's one.
Cortana's Microsoft one, yeah. There is a tie-up with Alexa at the moment, and I dare say before too long there'll be a tie-up with Google as well.
Alexa's Amazon.
Yeah. So
Google's just Google. They haven't got girls' names for their one.
Google Home.
Yeah.
What would you say to activate it?
What?
OK Google.
OK Google.
Yeah. Say OK Google, say hello Google, hey Google.
Yeah, our Alexa's a huge problem because my son's name's Alex. So half the time when he's sort of shouting at him, telling him to turn the TV off, Alexa pipes up and goes, "Sorry, I don't understand what you're on about."
Well, you think you got problems? My son name's Google. No, it's Jack. So no one come up with Jack for one of these things, please. I can imagine that. And
I didn't go out and buy one, I hasten to add. I got bought one for my birthday in November and thought, something I'd never ever have wanted to have. But,
so how's it been for you?
Well, I don't have any of the connected devices that you're supposed to have to you can't turn all the lights on because I don't have the technology. And there's loads of other things you can buy, aren't there, like thermostats that connect to it, but I don't have any of that stuff.
Well, what about just as a voice-controlled, internet-connected speaker where you can go, all right, Alexa, is it Alexa or Google?
It's Alexa. It's Amazon, so it's Alexa.
So
the name
all right,
of the
Alexa,
voice
why don't you
assistant.
stick on some Metallica?
That is basically what it's been used for the last few weeks, and it's pretty good at that actually, because you get if you're Amazon, what is it, subscriber, their sort of premium package that you pay £7 a month for, and Prime. If you're a Prime subscriber, then you get sort of access to the music library, and there's not much that's not. There's next tier up actually that gives you even more, but
I've been listening to the System of a Down channel. So just like with Spotify or whatever, you pick one band and then its algorithm sends you other stuff. And I can use a complete tangent here. Tenacious D. Have you ever heard any Tenacious D?
I know Tenacious D. Jack Black and come with the other guys.
I'd never heard. I'd heard Tribute, which is like their sort of single, but they play album tracks off it. It's bloody hilarious and incredibly rude. It's like Derek and Clive do metal.
They're like Flight of Conchords,
right? That
similar sort of like comedy.
So I've bought that album. I'm pissing myself. So anyway,
three things that we use it for are to play music. I wake up in the morning and can't be bothered to put the TV or the power the laptop up, so I just go, what's the news today? And it gives you quite a good sort of BBC head. No, it doesn't. It sort of tunes you into the BBC headlines with the newsreader reading it out.
It's really good.
It works really well.
So the Google one, you can turn up and you say, "Oh, tell me about my day in the news."
By the way, you've just eaten a donut, haven't you?
Yeah, I just had one.
You've just eaten a donut. Look at him! Look at him licking the sugar off his tash.
But you can say, tell me about my day, and it not only tells you about all your meetings, it tells you about the traffic on your way to work. If you've got a meeting in, I don't know, Allgate instead of going into the office, it'll tell you.
Gives you a little heads up.
You should know about this incident.
I could have done that this morning.
Yeah, basically. So it is actually really good, and that's where I think.
And weather's the other one that's quite useful, which is related, I suppose. The kids use it for stupid things, like trying to ask questions that it's never going to be able to answer. Do you like me? And what's your middle name? And rubbish like that. Okay. But you get funny answers sometimes. So it amuses them.
And Jamie, I know a topic you've been writing about at length for quite a while is the race. And you've said it now, and I'll ask you to sort of expand on it. You think sort of Google and Amazon are miles ahead of everyone else. Why is that?
They're just better. You just look at the algorithms. You just I'm not going to say I'm a software engineer, but
I look at the algorithms all the time.
It's the performance of the assistant is just better,
right?
And they've got it in more places.
Yeah.
That's the only way these assistants are going to get better. It's underpinned with machine learning technology, and like Google's scalable business. Google's business doesn't work unless there's everyone using it, and these machine learning technologies won't educate the assistants if there's no one using it. So the bigger the install base they have, the better and better their assistant's going to get.
It's the classic internet network effect thing.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised Amazon's been so good at it, actually, because with Google it almost makes sense. It comes from a search engine background, and it is a search to some extent. It's a search engine that's voice activated, isn't it? Who's the best tennis player in the world? Or people probably use it for things like that, and Google's been doing that for years in text form, obviously.
That's the reason I think that when we look at the race, who's going to be the best? Because you like to say in most sort of like segments, there's never one runaway winner. Look, when you look at smartphones, like there's no one brand which has absolutely destroyed the rest of the industry. But when you look at the internet, it often is. Amazon, it dominates e-commerce. Google is pretty much the only search engine that people use worldwide. And I just think that with the virtual assistants, these two will go light years ahead, and then eventually Google will take over and will become the really dominant.
Why will they overtake Amazon?
They got the ecosystem, where you look at the hardware and the software, because it's all about money at the end of the day. Whoever makes the most money from their virtual assistant is going to have more resource to plow into it, more resource to spread it elsewhere. And if you look at the basic business model, no one's going to pay to switch your light on and off. But they are going to pay like, they're not going to pay. They're going to indirectly pay for you to go get them a pizza, or something like that. So, the referral system is in place already with Google, because that's how it makes all its billions through its advertising, through its search engine.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So if you just go Google, get us 2 tickets to the latest Star Wars film down the road, and it just sorts everything out for you.
And then it takes 2 pence for every interaction that it does with that person down the road.
I can see your point. I suppose the only thing I'll say, I don't necessarily disagree with you. The only thing I'll say, to be devil's advocate, is Amazon's managed to corner the market in sort of the Kindle-y stuff, or at least dominate it.
But you'd never.
So they can do devices. But let me finish. I'm sure you're going to come up with a good objection. They can do devices, but the Kindle is basically an enabler for them to flog electronic books. Where I agree more with you. These smart speakers are about a lot more than just shopping.
I just don't think. I just think that making their own devices is a loss leader, and I just don't think that is a factor. And you can't make any money off it. You sell. If Amazon could sell 20 million devices worldwide, and they'd make 20 million times $54 or however much they're charging for each of the devices, and they make a shitload of money there. But that's all the money they're going to make. You look at the Amazon business model. It's about being an online shopping center and sort of like creating content. Those sorts of business models aren't necessarily applicable to the smart speaker, because you're not going to buy a T-shirt over your smart speaker because you can't see it. So that's where the internet is always going to. That's where Amazon is going to be very dominant on the internet for e-commerce. But Google has become very good at referrals. They're not actually selling anything to you. They're just acting as the bridge between the consumer and the third party. So that's where I think smart speakers will be very dominant, and why Google will make a shitload of cash out of it.
Well, another thing that interests me about the whole smart speaker thing, and I'll ask you about this again, Ian, is smart speakers were a big deal at CES last year. Yeah. And the angle I took on it when I was writing about it a year ago was the voice UI, which interests me, because if you look at user interfaces over the computer era, in the 80s we had sort of mouse and keyboard, and that kept going into the 90s, and then the next little I suppose you could say the GUI, the graphical user interface, was sort of that evolved over the 90s. And then to 2000s, the big breakthrough was 07, 08, when iOS and Android came on board and people realised how good a touchscreen UI could be. Because that was what stopped. I remember using like Nokia Symbian smartphones, and they're all well and good, but they weren't touchscreen optimised. Yeah. Or even worse, Windows Mobile before Windows Phone, which is basically a desktop Windows on a phone. And you had to get your phone, and you had to get a little stylus and have little drop-down menus and it was just so user unfriendly. And then when we got this sort of icon, just prod it with your finger thing, it was a lot easier. So that was the last major UI overhaul, and that's been perfect for smartphones. The smartphones are the dominant sort of internet connected device globally now. So what's next? Things like cars, things like living room, and other sort of hands-free environments. So we all agree that a touchscreen's not really acceptable for the car. Yeah. To navigate properly around a touchscreen, I do it when I'm using my phone as a sat-nav. Sometimes I'm a bit of a liability because I'm still having to spend a bit too long staring at my phone rather than driving the car. Then the only possible replacement for that can be voice. You've got to take touch out of it. One other possible one could be gesture. If you've got some kind of sort of sensors, like like what was that? That Microsoft gaming system where. Well, that was with cameras, wasn't it? More like the Nintendo one.
Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah, the Wii with a motion sensor. But if you had a way where
Minority Report, yeah.
Right, yeah, and you're doing all
where
that
people
sort of
are moving sort of holographic
and in principle you
images
could write an
around.
email, perhaps by doing that, or perhaps you'd learn some sign language. Anyway, that's
holographic images, I guess, maybe get around one of the problems that Jamie brought up, which is that when you're trying to shop with maybe something that combines the two. You want to be able to use voice, but you also, hey Alexa, show me some pictures of T-shirts that Nike's made.
And then you can swipe through Minority Report.
And then you can swipe through them and go, I'll have this one.
I mean, that's where, eventually that'll just be the norm. Yeah. You're for instance, if it that what we were talking about earlier in the week, where Google's trying to get rid of the smartphone, or they're not trying to get rid of the smartphone, but they could potentially get rid of the smartphone because everything's going to have a screen before too long.
Yeah.
You know, your fridge is going to have your screen. You've got a Chromecast TV which is connected to your speaker. So if you said to Google, okay, I want to buy a T-shirt, send me a T-shirt, all of a sudden it would flash up on the Chromecast TV, or it would flash up on the screen. If you've got a speaker in your kitchen, it would be up on the fridge screen. So I think
What are all these smartphone addicts going to do when they cut
I think the phone gets relegated back to its status before like sort of 10 years or so ago, where it's primarily what you take when you're out and about. So I don't know about you, when I get home, my smartphone's relegated. So I've got tablets, I've got PCs, I've got laptops, I've got PlayStations,
It doesn't happen
telly.
in our house that much.
So my phone remains in my pocket, but pretty much I'll only interact with it if I get an alert.
I'm trying not to interact with technology at all at the moment, where possible. But I know in the house.
I thought you hadn't been writing much.
Yeah, how did you do your job?
apart from doing the job, but yeah, I mean, my wife and my kids sit on smartphone devices in the evening, even when the TV's on. You know?
And everyone's got that after Christmas, especially people who've got kids. Yeah. There won't be a single, I bet you the playground picking up time conversations are dominated by, we just couldn't get little Johnny off his iPad. And it's, I've got thoughts about that. It probably isn't the forum, but I think some parents could probably take more control than they do.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's another matter. But what I want to ask you, before we move on, is about voice UI. Now you've used it. Now you've gone, hello Alexa, sort my life out for me. How easy was it to get the voice UI up and running? How accurate is it? How satisfactory do you find the whole experience?
Getting it up and running was. It was almost like you didn't have to get it up and running. Right. It was a case of connecting the phone to the device.
Like Dragon Naturally Speaking 10 years ago, we had to train it for about 2 days.
No, there was none of that. Yeah. I mean, I think you even have to do that actually with Siri, don't you, on the iPhone when you start it off. I upgraded my iPhone recently and asked me to say a few things, maybe to recognise my voice. But the Echo Dot, which is the one the kind of device that I've got, just. I mean, it's good. I mean, it doesn't always recognise things. Right. If you ask for something a little bit more obscure,
right. You haven't accidentally bought some sort of sex toys.
Well, I've not tried to use it to buy anything, and I think that's maybe one of the other problems. Is I think you can use it to buy stuff. I think you can. You can order stuff over it, but
just try not to pick stuff that sounds too much like something dodgy.
Yeah, and it's not just not being able to see an image of what you're buying. Yeah. It's also worrying that you've been understood correctly, like you say.
It's called Echo Show, where there's a screen, so you can see what you're.
Okay, Echo Show.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like an iPad, but it's fat.
Thanks, Producer Pierre. We should get you a microphone.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't be part of the party, mate. Seeing as you seem to have decided you are anyway.
But it works really well. I mean, I think it's got better very quickly, hasn't it? This voice UI stuff. It's like AI.
And as Jamie was saying, part of it is because the more input it gets, the more.
Yeah, and it's just developing at an incredible pace.
And it will start to recognise your voice.
Yeah.
So the longer you use it and the more you use it, the less you'll have to be worried
until Magda
about.
speaks with her Eastern European accent, and then that really confuses it.
Well, you'd be surprised. So you can. So I bought my parents a Google Home, and what you do is you link up your phone to the actual Google speaker device, and you train. You teach your phone to recognise your voice, then that is sent over to the device.
Right.
So in theory, if you get it right and you've got 3 or 4 smartphones hooked up and you've trained it suitably, it can actually distinguish between your wife, your 2 boys. It's.
They don't even have that in the new Star Trek film, do they? Wasn't there a scene in the one a few years ago with the Russian guy trying to sort of pronounce V's properly and the assistant didn't understand him.
Right. Yeah, well, if it can understand Welsh, it can understand anything, I think. Cool. Okay, so that was interesting. One other thing, I don't want to dwell on it too long, but it just occurs to me before we move on to what was hot at CES. The other one was this sort of autonomous car side of things, I think. That came up. NVIDIA's done a sort of remarkable job. NVIDIA, which we used to just think about as the maker of the sort of chips inside graphics cards, has quietly been sort of tinkering away at sort of what they call GPU, which is more general purpose use of graphics processing units. And one of the markets it seems to be doing really well on is automotive. So one thing, I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but I thought it was interesting, Jamie, when you were explaining a story you were writing at the start of the week, is this They reckon it can support grade 5.
Level 5.
Level 5. There we are. Can you just quickly tell us what that means? Level 5 smart car or whatever.
So it's the different levels of autonomy.
Right.
So you've got like level 0 is we're driving.
Okay.
Then it just sort of gradually the system takes more and more and more of the driving responsibilities
So 1 might
away.
be it helps you park, and
yeah.
Right.
Two is like acceleration or like 2 systems basically that are.
Do we have
introduced in
one
the
at the moment? Do some people have ones on the road?
Yeah.
Scott. I mean, because you get cars, don't you, that park themselves.
You do
and
get cars
have
that
some degree of autonomy now.
So in the States, you can get some cars that like literally will change lanes for you and do all that sort of thing. But it is very much on, it's on highways.
Yeah.
It's long straight roads where it can pick up everything, and you're not going to have like a child run across or anything like that.
It's still a very controlled environment.
It's still very, very embryonic.
Yeah.
Like it's. And the further you go up in the levels, the more autonomous it is.
And
and
5
level
is
5,
totally just no human.
Level 5, you don't have to worry about anything. Well,
Right.
level
just have a
4
kit.
is you don't necessarily have to worry about anything. But there's sort of like 1% of scenarios that you very rarely come across where the car just can't deal with it.
I see.
Some extreme scenarios.
That's
like
all you want is 1%, isn't it?
Yeah, but you've gone like off-roading in the Brecon Beacons or something like that, and it can't deal with it there, so it asks the driver to intervene. But level 5 is where there is 0 scenarios where, and NVIDIA think they've nailed it.
Oh, fair play to them. And that's going to keep being a major theme of CES. What level do you think Knight Rider is?
It doesn't drive itself, does it?
It's 11. It goes up to 11. Okay. Before we move on from CES, there was one other story concerning Huawei. Not the network side, which is the sort of hat we normally talk about Huawei. It's their smartphone side, and they've actually done a pretty good job on the smartphone side. They're solid number 3 global smartphone vendor. So Samsung's number 1, Apple's number 2, Huawei's number 3. And but one market they haven't cracked is the US. So unlike there's other Chinese vendors that shift a ton of units like Oppo and Vivo and Xiaomi and all that sort of thing, but they're mainly domestic. Although Xiaomi's sort of started diversifying a bit geographically. But Huawei...
You can get Huawei phones in the US though, can you?
Yeah, well, I was going to say they're the only global one. Yeah, so you can get them, but right now just through the indie channel.
Right.
So just from going to some random shop. Whereas I think I heard some stat chucked around which sounds plausible to me, certainly remembering back to my previous life when I had to know things like this, that I think the US smartphone channel is like something like 90% of all smartphones sold in the US are through the major operator channel or carrier channel, as they call it over there.
Is it the same here, do you think? Or?
No, it'll be the majority, but it won't be that much.
Because there's independent stores that people would go to.
I think it's just a culture change. I think if you went back 6 or 7 years, the UK wouldn't have been too dissimilar. Everyone got their phone through subsidised.
Well, but then you've also got to consider postpaid and prepaid. So if you're on a sort of pay-as-you-go thing, then you've got to buy your own handset, haven't you?
I thought T-Mobile had sort of shaken this up a bit though, with its whole un-carrier, no subsidies.
Yeah, but T-Mobile's still one of the major.
Yeah, but it's tried to move away from that, hasn't it? Where your sort of device is very kind of closely tied to the.
Yeah, but you still probably buy your device from them. It's just that the decoupling, the unbundling. So the typical model is that they use subsidised handsets to lure you into a 2-year gig, and they go, look, you can have a quote free phone if you promise to pay us $100 a month for the next 2 years. Yeah. So it's not free; it's cost you $2,400. And then, but some of the this is again going back to my previous life. A lot of the operators were getting the arsehole about this because they thought it was really eating into their bottom line, the amount they were having to subsidise, especially iPhones, because of course Apple thinks its devices are worth a hell of a lot more than anyone else's. Opinion is divided on that. I personally am a fan of iPhones, but I don't.
Well, the iPhone X is ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, I don't fancy paying the premium for their phones. That's not to say they're not good phones. I just don't think they justify the premium. But anyway, other people will disagree. So that's that. And long and short of it is, if you want to shift a decent amount of gear in the States, you've got to go through the operator channel right now. And Huawei hasn't managed to crack the operator channel, but then the rumour was at the start of the week that they were going to announce a deal with AT&T. In fact, there was another rumour they might be announced a deal with Verizon. So that would be, that's the majority of the operator channel, and therefore the majority of all channels in the US. But then another story, I think it was The Information, wasn't it, Jamie?
Yeah.
That broke this. And Jamie wrote this up, but I'll sort of paraphrase. Feel free to tell me if I got it wrong. The Information broke a story that basically AT&T would be pressured to back out of the deal at the 11th hour by US government departments of some variety. The long and short of it being, that Huawei sort of prevented from getting involved in quite most of the networking in North America because it's parts of the government are worried about how close Huawei is to the Chinese state.
Yeah.
I've got to stress, I don't have any intelligence on this one way or the other, so I'm not saying they are close, I'm not saying they're not close. I'm just saying that's the reason that they've not had a fair shout in the US. But they thought, okay, all right, you're not going to let us do networking stuff, but surely we can flog phones. But apparently not. They've poked in their nose in there, so they can't go through all that. This is supposed to be for the Mate 10, which is like a sort of phablet size. It'll be about 6-inch plus screen size. And they even had a guy that the Verge did a good report on it, Vlad Savov, who's been at the Verge / sort of Engadget for ages, a proper veteran tech reporter, went in on their keynote. And at the end of it, these keynotes from companies like Huawei and Samsung are often incredibly bolted down. Bloke exec comes up with a suit and a tie on. He's got his auto prompt. He just reads it out. No nuance, no ad-libbing, nothing. And it's all very yawn. But this guy at the end of it sort of almost did a Steve Jobs. He goes, one more thing. But this one more thing, instead of it being a product launch, was like, and one more thing. It's more like a cabbie going, and another thing. What's going on with these bloody US government stopping us flogging our new phones? What's that all about? And he seemed genuinely quite indignant. Right. This is like the CEO of
the American business
of their devices.
American devices, or the overall devices. Yeah, okay.
Overall. So I thought that was good. It was good to see one of them come up and fight their corner and just basically go, this decision's bollocks.
Yeah. Well, they sort of tried to play it down, though, didn't they? In other reports afterwards, and was putting out statements. I think didn't Jamie get told by them that they never confirmed any kind of deal?
Yeah, but then they told Ray.
Well, then they told Ray that they had been working on a deal with AT&T. Exactly. So they sort of didn't really get the story.
Well, exactly.
That's just PR, though, isn't it? I think it's quite clear that
I'm also not too sure how on the record that conversation was.
Which one? The one with Ray?
Yeah.
Oh, he published it, so don't worry about it.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's fine. He's like, oh, what have we done? Sorry, Ray. So yes, that was just one more little thing from CES.
Can I chip in?
Yeah.
It's a bit off tangent, but
go for it, man.
On the iPhone that you mentioned, how incredibly expensive it is.
Yeah.
Has there been any data so far about how sales of this new X device? Because I got offered an upgrade,
right.
And I noticed that to get a 7, which is what I've ended up with, was just a pretty standard, carry on as you are, and we'll send you a phone. But if I wanted to go and get an X,
7, not even an 8.
Not even an 8.
So the 8
but I was previously on a 6, so I guess.
Okay, but the 8 was the one that was launched at the same time as the X, and I'm so pleased we're still calling it X because it really annoys Apple when you do that.
To get an 8, I'd have had to pay a little bit more per month, but no sort of upfront fees. But an X, they were asking for something like 400, 500 quid upfront fee plus quite a hefty tariff, and I can't imagine that kind of pricing is going to get a lot of people buying this.
Well, I don't think there's hard data yet, but I think you might be surprised my gut feel is when the data comes out that they will have sold a shed load of them.
Who's in a position to spend 500 quid up front on?
Well, people find the cash. No one had the cash. 10 years ago when smartphones started, no one had the cash. China, when I was tracking smartphones, when I was at Strategy Analytics before this, China kept growing and growing, and all the conventional wisdom was, hold on a second, there's like about 20% rich middle class in sort of Shanghai and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then most of China is still sort of hinterland, relatively agrarian. They're never going to find the cash. And it just kept growing and kept growing and kept growing. So people find the cash because it's such an important device to them, and there's so much perceived brand value in Apple. So I think you might be surprised. Okay. Pierre's giving me...
Oh, I don't have any data at all. So
get on with it vibes. That was Ian's fault. I was ready to move on. Yeah. So if you're going to hassle anyone, hassle Ian. Okay, one more thing, sort of semi-related to CES. I put up a story today which had a link to a keynote at CES. And I was particularly, the reason that keynote caught my eye is two of the speakers in it. One of them was called Eric Weinstein. I think it's Weinstein. It's the opposite way to how Harvey pronounced it anyway, right. Which is important, obviously. Weinstein. Yeah, anyway, sorry everyone. Who is a really smart guy and does quite a lot of appearances on sort of podcasts that, like, certainly me and Pierre like to watch, like sort of Joe Rogan, that sort of thing. And then another guy who also crops up on these called Ben Shapiro, who's like a sort of conservative figure and quite combative, but also very smart, very articulate, and all that sort of thing. And they had them both on a panel together with a journalist, I've forgotten her name, but she covers media for a site called Axios. And they were talking about the future of news. And one of the things they got onto was things like fake news and just the dissemination of information over the internet in general. And that's something that particularly interests me right now, because I think we're at a sort of really interesting time. I know we've had Twitter and Facebook and the internet for ages. And I know that we're all aware of how polarised and shrill it is, and you're either in this camp or that camp, and everyone just lobs verbal grenades at each other the whole time. It's all very tiresome. But to actually have a proper look at how this stuff functions was really interesting. So I recommend that people have a look at that video clip, which is at the bottom of a story I published today, which is about the main subject I want to talk about, which is social media censorship. Now, the reason social media censorship is interesting is because we're getting all sorts of stuff. Like in Germany, they got this law that I won't even begin to try and pronounce. It's one of those German words. It's got about 20 letters in, nearly all of which are consonants. But they've got this law that's clamping down quite hard on, for want of a better term, hate speech online. And that's ending up being quite scattergun. And there's, the stuff that gets reported on obviously is where some quite legit stuff comes up, where someone goes, I think kittens are really cute, and that gets banned because some algorithm's gone wrong somewhere. So there's that going on. Then there's the main thing I wrote about today, which is a story about alleging that Twitter is sort of downgrading certain users based on the language they use and what they talk about. God, I've forgotten the specific word. It's terrible. I'm going senile. There's a specific word for basically downgrading your prominence on Twitter without even letting you know they're doing it. Yeah. So you're sitting there tweeting away with all your foul opinions, but no one's really reading them because they've tweaked something at the back end. Right. And of course, that's very contentious. Some people will allege it's along ideological grounds, other people for other reasons. Twitter's come out and defended itself and goes, it doesn't do that anyway, except for real nutcases. There's other stuff like YouTube is doing something that is described as demonetizing. So there's another podcaster that I like to listen to quite a lot from the States called Dave Rubin. And he does more sort of political stuff, like Joe Rogan, who Pierre and I both watch. His is more general. It might be political. It might be about MMA. It might just be, he did one James Hetfield. Yeah, and so it's all just good stuff, and he just has a good long chat with people. Rubin tends to be more talking about politics or sort of pseudo-academic stuff like psychology or sociology or something like that. But he's very middle of the road. He's trying to go for balance. He's trying to get all kinds of views on. There's nothing ranty going on there from whether it's right wing or left wing, but he keeps getting demonetized, which means that they don't serve ads.
This is one of the problems of the dominance of the big tech companies on the internet. We all like to think of it as a forum for free speech, but when it's kind of controlled heavily by Google and Twitter, and they're able to do that and downgrade things, then you're ending up in quite a dangerous situation. Yeah, I think
so. And so that was the general distracting sign language going on here.
Well, I don't know. We're just trying to figure out how long, whether me and Ian get to say anything, or if you're going to monologue the entire time. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any way, Pierre, we could work out how much time Jamie's had on air so far? Because I think he's had a decent go.
We should have like a chess thing.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, hint taken. I will cut the monologue short and throw it over to poor old Jamie, who never gets to word in edgeways. So yes, it comes down to the censorship. So there has to be some censorship. You can't have people recruiting terrorists and all that sort of thing. But increasingly the ball seems to be thrown in the court of these private companies to sort of censor language and all that sort of thing. And that's sort of quite a flawed process. So Jamie, have you got any thoughts on this?
No.
Oh, God. back to you, Ian, because I think you do have some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the main thought is the point I suppose I've just made, which I think it's a worry that these big private companies like Google and Twitter they're in a slightly strange position because, and I suppose it ties in a bit with the sort of net neutrality discussion as well. We all like to think the internet's a sort of publicly owned thing, I guess, to some extent, and a forum where anybody can go and say what they want, and it doesn't get prioritised or discriminated against. It's almost like we think that democratic governments should sort of be responsible for making sure that that's how it works. But actually, we rely so heavily now on Google. I mean, it's the only search engine there is, isn't it, really? I mean, I know they have Bing, but it's almost insignificant. So as soon as Google decides that it wants to abandon its motto of don't be evil and start fiddling around with this kind of stuff and deciding what is fake news and what isn't fake news, we end up in
on your feed. Facebook has an algorithm that prioritises what comes up on your feed.
Exactly.
And Twitter and YouTube, which is obviously owned by Google.
It's where it goes, I guess, that it starts to become a bit concerning.
So your gut feel in terms of, there's a basic equilibrium here where you've got security at one end and you've got freedom on the other.
Yeah.
And everyone accepts that somewhere in the middle is the ideal, because if you have 100% freedom, then you could just have nutters roaming around the place, because you'll have no police or anything. But 100% security, you've got this Orwellian hell where no one can do anything.
Well, it's a difficult balance, I suppose, because you don't...
more towards the sort of...
I suppose. I mean, it's interesting you brought up Germany. I don't know the details of what they've done, but I don't really like the fact that Germany has... I mean, there's a very high-profile case with a controversial historian. Can't remember his name now, but he's a Holocaust denier.
Right. Yeah,
and it's not just Germany. Austria as well, I think, has laws that don't allow you to sort of deny the Holocaust.
But it's still words, isn't it?
And he's written some very kind of scandalous, repugnant books with stupid views in them. And I think he was jailed actually in Austria. I think there was a court case and he served a jail sentence.
And, he might have gone looking for it to martyr himself.
I think, possibly, but I think that's ridiculous. Personally, I don't think that you should.
Just words, isn't it?
It's still just words, and he should be. No matter how stupid his views are and how repugnant they are, he should be allowed to air them, and people should then be free to sort of take aim at his ridiculous opinions. But
that's how they get.
But to throw someone in jail for saying that is pretty much what the Nazis were doing anyway, isn't it? Saying things that they just didn't
go too far down that road.
They just didn't agree with, essentially, though.
That starts to become very authoritarian. That's the equilibrium I'm talking about. What are you, Jamie? More or less censorship?
I don't know. It's how do you define hate more than anything else.
Totally.
I think there are so many things there's so many rules that don't make sense because the basic principle hasn't been defined at the bottom, and it's a big philosophical question of what is hate, whose definition do you use? Why should my definition of hate be right and yours be wrong? When you look at my definition and you think I'm wrong and
is it literally
I'm right.
Hate? If you say I hate ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, where do you draw the line? So,
well, I suppose the other thing at the moment is sort of inciting people to terrorist acts.
Well, that's what it used to mean back in the day, and it's just sort of crept. Yeah. And inciting people to violence.
There's a grey area, isn't there? Someone sort of spouting off about his sort of extremist views of Islam and saying some nasty things. Is that itself incitement for people to rise up?
Yeah. Well, then you get on the flip side, you get the sensitivity of the recipient. Yeah. So you say to me, Jamie says to me, Scott, you're doing too much talking and not giving us a chance. This is going to be a good game. He's trying to get a donut. Every time he tries to get a donut, I'm going to make out I'm about to talk to him. Jamie could say to me, Scott, you got a gob on you. And I'll be like, I'll laugh it off. But some other people might lose their shit over that and take it incredibly seriously. So a lot of it's just down to the sensitivity of the recipient.
But you can't. But I mean, this is the one thing I don't get. How do you actually rule on something which they're trying to do now without having a basic understanding of what hate is? And I think fundamentally, it's if you want to tie it back to the telco world, you could say there's all this argument of whether data is whether net neutrality should be allowed, or how much can you charge for it. But if you just answer the basic question at the bottom, is data a utility or not? then everything else is answered above it. Okay. So I think just governments just don't like to answer the really difficult questions, but they like to make rules that satisfy and confuse everything, even though there's no basic definition at the bottom. We're
starting to get to the phase of the podcast where Pierre's doing so much sign language. He's like one of those blokes who tells planes where to go on the runway. So, Jamie, I got you. You're going to have to hold that donut as well while you're doing it. You've been writing some stuff about the government this week.
Yeah, so
you have to speak while you're eating it.
It's frustrating. It's something that really, really wound me up. So the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport, which is...
Karen, I'm just going to eat something.
Yeah, easy.
I'm free to do so.
Which is honestly one of the daftest departments I've ever come across. Like, who thought merging those four things together was logical? I just don't get it. But then, so with the reshuffle, Amber Rudd, I think, used to be in charge of that department. She's buggered off to Northern Ireland. Matt Hancock, who was the Minister for Digital, has been promoted to the Secretary of State for DCMS. And there's a couple of new MPs in the department. Now, 2 days after the reshuffle, I gave the press team a ring and I said, look, Hancock's gone upwards.
He's the new dude.
Yeah, he's going to parties now. He's doing a really good impression of the Minister for Fun. Who's taken over the digital stuff? And they turned around to me and they said, look, we're working, all the hours in the day. We haven't figured it out. And then I go on Twitter, like 20 minutes later, and you got one of the bloody MPs who's supposed to be in charge of this department at the Tate Modern.
That's culture, isn't it? That's the C.
Yeah, I know, but when they're trying to redefine this department and figure out who's in charge. Yeah, he was down there. He was seeing an exhibition,
looking at a puddle on the floor and going, "That's amazing."
So then I wrote I wrote a story about that, and then the next day I get into the office. And the Minister for Tea and Biscuits, bloody Michael Ellis, he's done Tate Modern one day. He's at a heritage museum the next day for a couple of hours. So then I think, okay,
was he Minister for just checking out museums?
Yeah, well, maybe Margot James, that's the new appointment. Maybe she's Captain Buzzkill, and she's the one in the office who's sorting everything out. While Hancock swans around London Fashion Week parties, and Ellis tries biscuits in various museums around the country. But no, she's checking out some apprentices' work down in South London. I'm just like, well, is anyone going to actually sit in the office and figure out who is in charge of this very critical department? Well, it's not critical. I mean, because this is the other thing that really drives me up the bloody wall, is that you've got, proposals for 5G infrastructure sitting next to, an application for Britain to host the next Badminton World Cup. It's just not logical.
And some dilettantes, you and I had a chat about whether or not these government ministers should have any prior knowledge of this sort of thing, but they will typically, for the subject matter, be dilettantes and just sort of winging it from day one.
That's another bloody
That's
thing.
the problem with government, though, isn't it? They're sort of shuffling around all the time.
Yeah.
Someone gets to know something, and all of a sudden they're an expert, and then they get moved on to another.
I don't get what these shuffles are all about.
But they're not an expert. So Hancock has got no bloody experience whatsoever in digital. So he's supposed to hire people that give him advice.
Right.
And I found a job application for the head of regulation of post-Brexit telco regulations. No, but I had a look through the job through the job description, and there's you don't need any experience in the telco world. Right. So the theory of ministers are just administrators and they get advice off people who know what they're talking about. This guy, who's supposed to be head of a very important area of government, doesn't have to have any experience either. So maybe the person below him, but then how senior is that person going to be? So is their experience actually valid? So you got people advising people who have no experience, advising the people who have no experience either.
In summary, you think politics and government are all pretty useless?
I think it's honestly like an episode of The Thick of It.
Yeah.
It's these guys, honestly, it's an absolute farce at the moment, and this. We're supposed to be a country that has digital ambitions and we're going to rule the world. I just can't see it. We're going to end up at the bottom of the pile, and it's all going to be because of the Minister for Fun is spending too much time taking photographs with Rita Ora at bloody London Fashion Week.
You just wait. Next election, Corbyn will be in charge, and everything will be all right.
Oh, Don't even get me started
It's the
there.
public sector, I guess. That's the thing,
Well
isn't
played.
it? Yeah.
So, Pierre, you'll be happy to hear I'm going to move it along again. We've got one more rant.
We're running out of time, are we?
Rant. We've had Jamie's. Well, we're not running out of time. You've got time for your rant du jour. And just for a change on the podcast, we thought we'd talk about
It was
5G.
last week to some extent.
But you wrote about it between
I
then.
did. Well, I kind of got the idea to write about it from last week's podcast, I think.
Because I saw your headline, but I've got to admit I haven't read it, for which I apologise.
No, I suppose there's been a lot of 5G announcements over the last few weeks, all following on from the standardisation that happened at the end of last year of the 5G new radio. I mean, we were talking last week about the sort of 5G marketing wars having started.
Yeah.
And I just kind of fear that Mobile World Congress is going to descend into this, theatre of sort of announcements about 5G new radio launches. None of which are very exciting, really, if you think about it. It's just more of the same that we've had with 4G and 4G plus and 4.9G and whatever.
Especially with this non-standalone business.
But this is the thing. I think that it's sort of losing sight of the bigger picture, because there's 5G as a new radio technology, which really doesn't do anything more than boost your bandwidth, essentially, and give you faster speeds on your phone.
Yeah, well, eventually they're going to start banging on about latency and all that jazz, aren't they?
Yeah, but from a user perspective who's using a smartphone to get 5G, latency is the same thing, really, isn't it? It's just getting rid of the delay. You get
this is going to be one of the issues with them over-marketing it, is a lot of what's going on with 5G isn't that relevant to consumers.
It's not, and I think that's the problem, is that I mean, Mobile World Congress shouldn't really be talking all that much, I don't think, about the sort of stuff that's been coming out of AT&T and T-Mobile and Sprint recently, where, they can bang on about 5G smartphones, and maybe some consumers, in fact, probably quite a lot of consumers are going to run out and buy 5G smartphones because they want the latest and the greatest thing.
And?
Yeah, but MWC is a trade show. They should really be focusing on the bigger picture, I think, which is 5G as a kind of more transformative technology, what's going on outside the radio area. And I heard a lot of service providers late last year. I mean, this was a concern that was expressed at MWC last year by really significant people in the industry, like Telefonica's CTO, saying there's too much noise about the radio. That's not the most exciting thing. I'm a bit concerned that if we accelerate the radio, we're going to lose sight of other stuff. Yeah. And then at the end of last year, we heard an executive from DT stand up and say, things have fallen behind, or they need a push. Things like, cloudification and some of this other stuff that's going on. And it'd be nice to hear a lot more about that, I think, at MWC than what I fear we will end up hearing about.
Yeah, and like, something that...
Jimmy, sort of talked over you a bit there. But
No, it's fine.
on my rant.
I was going to agree with you.
Okay. Yeah, I better let him speak, or he'll start giving me his looks.
No,
You start lobbing donuts at my head.
I mean, I was speaking to one of the guys from Nokia this week, and he turned around and said, there's a lot of noise coming out about 5G in terms of mobile, but the great things are going to be like IoT in like the smart harbours or something like that, where you've got all of the containers being moved around autonomously. Right. And, it's boring, and the consumer won't necessarily see the direct benefit, but that'll increase efficiency at that harbour through the roof. And all of a sudden, delivery from Amazon is cut down from 3 days to 1 day or 2 days. And, that's a benefit to the consumer, but it's not sexy.
Exactly, and efficiency for the operators as well, because I think one of the points of 5G as a transformative technology is to make them look a bit more like the cloud companies, to improve margins and.
Well, to improve margin, but the other thing, when they bang on about agility and DevOps and all these kind of buzzwords, the upshot of being more agile is supposed to be able to come out with cool new products. And that's the thing that's really lacking. Like, someone who's been on the pod lots of times before and recently got a new job, Mary Clark. Whenever you get her on this subject, she'll not, and she did when I interviewed her earlier on this week, this came out. It's just like, where's the actual innovation at the consumer-facing side? What new stuff are operators offering to me such that I'm willing to give them a few more quid? Yeah. And there aren't really. And, I don't think... Sorry?
I'm not convinced they're ever going to address that problem.
No,
but I think at least they can try to be... the way to go is to try to overhaul these sort of legacy networks they've got and move more towards that cloud model. And it will they give them an opportunity to innovate. That, you know, as you say, because it brings agility. Whether they'll do that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But at least it puts them in a position to do it, and they get the efficiency benefits as well. So
I just don't think there's room to, you know, to offer new sexy
No, I'm not
things.
sure what it would be. I'm not sure what's missing from my life.
well, the
then you don't-
internet giants are doing it all. So what can they do that those guys aren't doing?
Yeah, I just don't see what they can do. Or I mean, I quite honestly think that in 20 years' time, telcos will be completely utilised.
Yeah,
And I think the only thing that's holding the only difference between now and in 20 years' time is the infrastructure. So electricity is completely utilised, but it's because the electricity grid is there. You know, the only difference between telco and electricity is that we're still trying to build out the infrastructure to get complete coverage and complete 5G coverage, or 4G coverage, and then eventually 5G coverage. Once we got it, you know, they're utilities.
Just about operating, isn't it?
It's about
Well, like, you know,
increasing margins.
I'm struggling to think of what they could come up with, but I'd love to get some other perspectives. Maybe I should sort of set a precedent on this podcast and sort of talk to the camera and go, if there's anyone else who wants to come in as a guest podder. If Mary was around, I bet she'd be well up for this chat. But if there's anyone else around, anyone who's UK based who wants to sort of drop me or Jamie or Ian a line to say they're interested in coming in and being a guest on the pod to explain to us how operators can innovate. Just to warn you, if you're going to come in and pitch a company, just don't bother, because we won't stand for it. But if you want to come and have a proper chat, then I think that would be good, because I'm with you. I'm scratching my head to think what it could be.
I just don't get it.
I guess if we knew, we'd be billionaires, wouldn't we?
very
And
so.
not working for Informer.
But I can't even think of the area. I can't even take one step towards what it might be.
Is it? Yeah, you know, because content, they tried it, they're rubbish at it. You know, phones, there's only so much you can do. They can't offer a platform through social media, because that's already a massively saturated area at the moment. You know, what VR maybe could they gut in on that area? But then all of a sudden, the internet giants, someone's doing it better already.
So
AR, maybe autonomous vehicles, but
yeah, it's got to be to do with
where?
It's got to be to do with sort of data or billing, or just slightly more utilitarian stuff like that, but where you can actually do something really transformative with that, whether it's flexibility or whatever.
I'd say the logical place, if we went back 3 years, I'd say the logical place where they can offer genuine value, and it's because they've already got a billing relationship with us, we trust them with our credit card details and money, would be the e-wallet. But they've been so slow off the mark. It looks like, you know, Google's going to dominate the world, or something along those lines. You know, they've been so slow off the mark. That
I know you can get that one wrong. I mean, I won't name the operator, although I'm sure I have in previous podcasts.
Was it Vodafone?
Shush.
Was it
But I keep taking carrier billing off my son's smartphone, and they keep putting it back on, and then he starts going on these games where you have to do in-app purchases.
Oh, name and shame.
And he well, I mean, it's not directly their fault. He still had to do it, and he won't appreciate me sort of pointing that out on this public forum. But I swear, carrier billing, when I'd taken it off, went back on, and then before I knew it, he'd blown about another 50 quid on this stuff. And I'm just like, for God's sake. Anyway, cool. I think we're sort of running out of time, aren't we, Pierre? So thanks a lot for that, guys. That was great. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you join us for the next one.